the makeup quiz.
Nothing.
I will, nothing's posted. Well, you know, this would have been good to know earlier. I will check. Everything should have been posted Friday or Saturday last week. Okay. I will see what happened. I will have to make some adjustments too, because there's not much time left. I won't give you a lot more in there. And I don't want to overwhelm you, and I'll make things do not tomorrow. Okay, I will check at that. All right, trying to think. Yeah, I'll figure out what happened. It should be there. Unless I posted on last semester's class. I've done that once or twice. Okay, other questions? That's okay. Apologize for that. So the final exam will be in a week from today at 8 o'clock in the morning in this room. Yes. Okay.
Is it Thursday or Tuesday?
Should be Thursday. Thursday. That's what I had on my schedule. So I'm going to be here Thursday. Yeah. Thursday at 8 a.m. In this room, 8 to 10. So I'm sorry you have to get up even earlier. At least they stopped doing, they used to have 7:30 a.m. finals. At least we got them to move to 8. Even the faculty didn't like showing up to those. So, all right. It'll be the same format and organization of what we did on the midterms. Probably a little longer. So, where's my screen? There it is. Wanted to talk about one other thing, which is the last chapter of the book material. This kind of wraps things up. So we've been looking at, I've been talking about, maybe you're looking at, maybe you're paying attention to, cybersecurity top down, inside out. Yes.
Can you lower the screen, please?
Oh. Does that help any? Less clear? Okay. Yes. All right. So, you know, we looked at laws and compliance, operations security, human element security, physical security, network security, operating system security, mobile embedded systems, Internet of Things, application security. How do we know the system's secure? How do we know we're doing a good enough job? And so that's the section where we're talking about assessing security, evaluating what we're doing. Let's get this going. So remember earlier I talked about compliance and regulations. We have both industrial regulations, corporate regulations, and then we have compliance with laws, things that you had to do, HIPAA, that type of thing. Well, in the compliance, in the regulations, like in the HIPAA laws, for example, it says you have to assess. And what does that mean? And how do we do it? So one type of assessment that people do is what we call a vulnerability assessment. It's assumed to be a review of known vulnerabilities. It can include classes of vulnerabilities, groups of vulnerabilities. So we say, hey, we're gonna look, are we susceptible to malicious input? Are we susceptible to phishing type of attacks? Are we susceptible to social engineering types of attacks? We look at that as a general thing. We look at the code. Are we following the rules and regulations? Do we have good processes in place? Then, and I'll go into more details on some of this, and then there's penetration testing. Penetration testing is generally assumed to be looking for gaps in security, even unknown vulnerabilities. It's an attempt to break into the system. It's an attempt to steal that data, to get access to that data, to corrupt something, to say, look, we're actually trying your system. You know, hey, is it a locked door? Can I open it? You know, as simple as something like that. It's walking through the corporate offices, looking for those sticky notes with those passwords. It's lots of different things. It's also just pounding on the system. Can I break it? Using like the fuzz testing I talked about earlier on software, things like that. So we address human factors, we address physical security, we address software and logical security. And then we have to understand and use the results. And one thing that we're really concerned about is what you call analysis paralysis. So we spend time doing a full, detailed vulnerability assessment of my system and a penetration test, and it takes months. And we finally come up with said, okay, here's our vulnerabilities, here's what we need to do. And somebody says, well, wait a minute, we've got new software we're about to deploy. So why don't we wait? And then we do that, and then we reassess. Or people look at it and says, you know, we can't fix all these problems. I don't know what to fix. And you spend time just thinking about and trying to figure out what to do as the system's changing, as the world's being modified, and you never get anywhere. So what we want to do is make incremental improvements on the system. Document what needs to be done, look at the results of this, and then get the most critical, the highest risk, the most likely threats. And sometimes it's also the cheapest, the quickest, the easiest to fix. You know, it can be something like, oh, wait, we don't have a good password expiration policy. You know, we allow people to have their passwords forever. We can quickly fix that. You know, whereas, oh no, I have to deploy a network-wide intrusion detection system. That's going to take a little longer. So, when we go on our vulnerability assessment, this takes several steps. The first and foremost is mapping and discovery. You need to be able to look for vulnerabilities. You need to know your system. If I think of a house or a building, I want to know, you know, are all the doors locked? Because of possible vulnerabilities on locked doors. We have to know where all the doors are. You have to know where all the windows are. This is a true story now. During a visit to NASA JPL and Jet Propulsion Lab in Southern California, I found they had a contract with the Southern California utility company. The utility needed help mapping and discovering everything that was on the power grid and all the components of the power grid. Because even though they owned it and they managed it, they did not have a comprehensive map of it, which was really bizarre to me. Well, apparently what happened is they had bought out a couple neighboring smaller utilities, which didn't have good documentation, and they were trying to figure this all out. And so they said, well, we got a huge unknown. Oh, wait a minute, we got NASA in our backyard and they know about searching the unknown and finding things, so we'll have them help us. They're good about collecting data and doing this, so they had that project. That one surprised me a little, but parts of it made sense in that if they were looking at command and control hardware, if they were looking at computer components that connected to their network, that monitor things, part of what we call their SCADA system, supervisory control and data acquisition systems, knowing what's connected to the command and control of the power grid, that is really important. And they may not know that, where they may know, yeah, I know the wire goes here and the wire goes there, and there's a transformer and there's a transformer. I'm okay with that. I can physically follow those and map those. But oh, there's a computer connected from that substation, another one from this one. They both control the same protective relay. We're getting information from the same protective relay. I didn't know about that. And so part of that was just mapping and discovering. Common problem in large organizations. You know, just imagine here, University of Idaho, where are all the computers that are connected to this network? And what are those computers? And what is running on them? Now, we have a policy where we're supposed to, any staff-enabled computer, faculty or, you know, staff member, has to run certain protection software, has to be protected in a physical location, et cetera. There's management software that needs to be installed on the desktops so that it can make sure it's up to the people run updates, that they have their virus protection and other things. So centrally we can go look. Do they know where all those computers are? No. Can they get access to them? Maybe a way of mapping and discovering, doing an nmap or other things, starting pinging different addresses within the network and saying, hey, is it there? Is it there? Is it there? Which ones are there? Which ones are doing things? So we can, and we create a diagram or a database of all the devices on the network, and then we have problems. We have people like me who break the system. Okay, I have a router in my office that is NATed. It looks like a single device to the campus network. When they go in and they try to ping, they see the single IP address for my office. They do not see the, let's see if I can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 computers I currently have running in my office. Plus the 2 printers. Actually one, because one's a replacement for the other one and the other one's off now. So the 1 printer. So 8 devices in my office, but they see a single IP address. And some couple of devices where we're running Windows, some are running Linux, some are running virtual machines. Yes.
What kind of issues have come up from that misinterpretation of one device?
So they don't know what software I'm running. They can't go in and monitor and check, do I have virus scanner, virus protection on my devices? They can't go in and, you know, command and control software that's running on the Windows stuff and say, oh, we have this corporate management software running on your Windows device. We're going to query it and it's going to tell us when was the last time your antivirus was updated, when was the last time the system update, or even force corporate updates. My device can go through the firewall and talk to them and say, hey, here's my current status, but it's hard for them to come in. And there's a specific port they use. You know, we're going to go to this TCP port to talk to the software. Well, TCP port to my device goes to which Windows machine in my office, because they're asking one machine for a response. So we've had to work some ways around this. And then I'm running Linux, which is a completely different beast. And I'm running different versions of Linux. And then I have VM, one of the machines is a server, so I'm running 3 VMs on that machine. Plus actually no, that one has 2 VMs plus the host, so there's 3 logical machines running there. You know, discovering this is hard, figuring this out is hard. Another example is my devices may not be on all the time. What if I turn them off when I go home and they run the scan at night? They don't see that device. Okay, I had a visit to a company, may have mentioned this before, years ago, this is in the 90s. And they had on their site, it's a large company, and they worked with a lot of other people, a lot of other contractors. So they had a separate contractor network, which is completely independent of their corporate network. But the contractor network, they just set up for the contractors to use, and they were running scanners. And they were running scanners while they were in the office. This is an international company. So they ran scanners in the US-based office 16 hours a day. The other 8 hours was an European-based office. So basically during the night shift here was when the European office was doing their main work. And so, and this was back in the early 90s, and the person I was talking to said, yeah, we just would run things as part of our job while we're here, but we didn't automate things to run at night. The people over in Europe were doing that. Well, one guy, somebody came in the middle of the night for some reason, had to do some work. A rush project, he ran the scanner and found somebody had a web server up serving porn on the contractor network. So they did some more monitoring, found out, yeah, one of the contractors only at night, only between midnight and 6 a.m. was running the server, because they knew nobody was scanning it during those hours until this person just happened to come in and scan. And so, you know, we were talking about them about automating processes and doing things on an irregular schedule so they can't be predicted. And that's the type of thing we want to worry about. People will lie, cheat, and steal. People will bend the rules. People will do things you don't expect, and you got to be able to analyze it. So lots of tools, keep track of your devices, show them in a network diagram, keep track, watch what's happening on your network, watch the type of traffic. There are tools out there that actually could do fingerprinting of your devices and try and tell you what type of device it is in watching the type of communication that's going through and from. And they may detect, hey, that's a NATed router and there's multiple devices behind there. We're going to actually physically have to look at that location. For critical infrastructure and cyber physical systems, this should be easier because people in the power grid control system are constantly logging in and logging off with different devices Oh, I'm gonna bring a laptop in today. I'm gonna bring a cell phone in today. I'm gonna do an iPad. Oh, I'm gonna install a bunch of new computers into the lab, shut them down, redo them. No, it's very stable. So it should be easier. And the network is very well regulated. For corporate networks with mobile devices, maps ever changing. You know, I'm in here, I've got a mobile device connected to the network in wherever the router is in this room or this building. I go in my building, it connects to a different access point. So constantly changing, how do we pay attention to that? You know, here's an example of a network map. You know, where here we have a headquarter data center. We have a bunch of different servers, fabric interconnects. We've got devices here. Here's the internet over here. Let me see if I actually got this. So we got the internet here, a client access here through the internet router. We got a firewall. Wow. And we got some security servers and mobile stuff. This is the DMZ, another firewall to get into the internal part. We got a wide area network router that connects my building, multiple buildings together, the campus together, other things. But this is all internal to the network. Virtual machine servers, connection servers, a whole bunch of different things. This was just one map I found somewhere on the internet of an example of a network configuration. Or we can do something like this. And I know this is really blurry, but like we'll have a central hub here. So these things are the switches or the routers or the hubs, whatever you want to call them. These middle circles just take traffic from the servers. Here's a switch, here's our router, then over to this switch, which then goes here. So the square boxes, we'll do, those are the switches. This is all one local area network. This routes the information between the right things, sends the information to the right things. So this is now a router that routes it on different paths to the other sub networks. Okay. These are the types of diagrams you want to see. These are the types of diagrams the network needs to understand. This is not enough machines. Now you could do this, maybe get down to, okay, down to an individual subnetwork. Janssen Engineering Building could be a subnetwork, or computer science department could be a subnetwork. And then you can do further exploration there. But even then, departments, we have what, about 50 departments in the university? So you'd have to have 50 of these spread out, plus the colleges, plus the non-academic units. And you could start thinking these things get big. And there's a lot of research on just the human factors of viewing and exploring and examining these things to know what's there. Some people prefer table views. I'm going to just have a list, a table, an Excel spreadsheet type of thing of what's there. Others want graphic, but you have to zoom in, zoom out, explore. Some people, a lot of people have tried to look at, let's gamify the whole thing, turn it into an interface like you would see in a video game that allows you to zoom in and out and see, you know, the whole area. Figure out what works well in the video game community and just put that here. Because people are used to that and they've done a lot of research on that to figure out what works. And some of the there's another one, and this is a different network setup again, with a centralized hub. Now here, I know you can't see these, but so this is switch is 192.168.14.1 switch. Here's a router R7, R6, R5. This is a 192.168.23.2 address. Here's the central gateway 192.168.23.1. But also here it is 192.168.24.1, 17.1, 18.1, 19.1, 20. So each of these links into the central router have different IP addresses that are connected by these groups. And so it's just a different organization, different way of looking at things. You have to be able to discover, yes.
So when mapping, you want to get all the way down to the client level every time, or are there situations where getting to the switches and the routers and the servers would be a sufficient level of
you want to have different levels of granularity of visibility into your network. For some people, just looking at the main high level, what are our main networks? Where are the gateways into the sub networks? Where are the gateways into the local networks that we're just doing in a department? That's all I want to see. And other people, okay, now I need to explode that out and see what's in here. I need to know what's in the wiring closet. I need to see every single switch box in that wiring closet. And then I need to be able to click on that box electronically and say, oh, port 2 is connected to this MAC address, this physical machine over here. And we have that visibility here. So we can know I have, well, I don't have an example here, but in my office, we got a wall plate with 3 jacks, 2 network, 1 phone. And I've got actually 3 of those wall plates in my office. And so there's, well, so my office, you know, it's, so my building number, Jensen Engineering, my office number, room 225, wall plate numbers are, you know, A, 1, 2, or 3, plug A, B, or C. And so it's all labeled that way. And then they tell us it's in the wiring closet, whatever, switch, whichever, switch 3, port 4 connects to this port here. And they need to be able to manage all that to see, okay, we're seeing something from this IP address. Well, this IP address, we can route it back through this switch, this thing, we know it's coming from wall plate A in Jim's office. Wall plate 1A in Jim's office. And then the sysadmin comes and says, oh, we need to connect you to a secure network. So I have one of the wall plates, one of the wall plates, the 2 ports there only connect to our research lab. They don't connect to the main switch. And so they're physically wired separately. And so if I plug things in there, I have specific access. And it's behind much tougher firewalls and everything, but that's my back door behind those firewalls. But it's all managed physically. And so knowing that helps you understand what's going on in your network. Then we have local people. So we have our IT group in the College of Engineering who knows things like that. Actually, we have people assigned to Jensen Engineering versus Buchanan Engineering versus, you know, the different buildings who know what's going on in which building, because they're not going to know everything across even just the College of Engineering. And they're the ones who need to dig down and figure out what's where. And they're the ones constantly updating the spreadsheet, the database with these numbers that, oh, Jim needed to plug a new machine into this. I'll authorize that MAC address for this port in his office to connect to this secure network. Yes.
So how does that all tie into, like, because when you have to set up a LAN device in like one of the dorm rooms, you have to log on and like submit the IP address with like your Vandals login, and how does that all tie together?
So where you're physically plugged in? Yeah, so that it automates a lot of that, but it says, okay, you're physically plugged in and knows what port you're plugged into. And so it updates the database with your MAC address and then ties that MAC address to your user ID. So they know, oh, wait, we see something on this IP address. Well, this IP actually was coming from this port at this MAC address, and that's his fault. And the more we can automate it, the better. For a lot of this, but then we can monitor and keep, you know, but it's all about tracking and logging and knowing what's where. You know, so we need to be able to discover these devices, hosts on the network, as they're plugged in, as they're connected, as they're being used. You know, what are the characteristics of devices that we need to know? What could go wrong? What makes this difficult? Yeah, oops, I left the breakout group thing there. But these are the types of questions you need to think about and ask. What could go wrong? Okay, so I do a scan. You connect in the dorms, you connect a new device. MAC address goes out, it registers, you log in, it's all fine. Maybe they ask you some questions about the device. Actually, I don't think they do in the dorms, but they could in a network. They could even check, download this. I know I did something where I was visiting at a government facility, and what they did is they had me download and install software on my laptop that then gave them information about everything that was on my laptop that they were worried about. It wasn't running a virus scanner, et cetera, before I could actually get permission to connect. Okay, so I got that, but they did the scan, they checked, I connected. What could go wrong now? Yeah.
Download something else on your computer?
I could download something else after they scanned and put it on my computer. I could plug in a different device that spoofs and fakes the MAC address. If I have the ability of changing my MAC address and getting my network card to lie, And said, well, we've changed it. I can put in any other device pretending to be that original. Most devices allow you to do that these days, laptop computers, etc. So you could change the MAC address a lot. It thought it was one, it's now something else. You can definitely spoof your IP address, but yes, I've definitely been able to do this MAC address. And virtual machines, a virtual machine is running, you assign MAC addresses to them. That's always automatic. And if the host is running what we call promiscuous mode, the host can observe anything. It can see all network traffic that goes by it, and it can say, hey, that's MAC address belongs to my device. Well, when it's sending things out, it has to send out the right address. So there's a lot of spoofing, because bad guys like cheat and steal, a lot of spoofing that go on, that can be a problem. So we do the best we can. So our network, part of discovery, physical, the wire goes through a network switch. Switch, if managed, can provide information to IT team about the MAC address on the device and the port, etc. For wireless devices, we connect through wireless protocol to a network access point. Access point, if managed, can provide information to the IT team about the MAC address of the device that's connected. Like each newly connected device should be registered with the system. Again, we can have automated support. That's kind of what we're talking about. Should include information about the operating system, description, the hardware, etc. Often that doesn't happen. We do need to differentiate between infrastructure devices, our servers, our network switches, our hubs, our routers, and user devices, our desktops, laptops, mobile devices, phones, printers. The infrastructure devices are the ones we're more worried about. They're higher risk. Our devices have IP addresses associated with them. We could permanently fix them. Basically say this MAC address has this IP address, always. This is typical for infrastructure devices. And domain name services will map a user readable name like uidaho.edu to that fixed IP address for that fixed physical address. We also have the ability to do DHCP, which is the domain host control protocol, where somebody says, hey, I'm a device, I'm connecting, give me an IP address. And it says, hey, this one's available. A lot of devices are set up that way. Your laptops, my phone. Whenever I go to a network, it says, hey, give me an IP address. It says, okay, here's one. This is the next one I have available. I got 100 of these available to hand out as needed. You get a lease to it, a license to it for 24 hours. And then I give it away if you're not still connected. If we're not careful, we could have two devices with the same IP address, and that could be a problem. When I have something that's, what I tell people I prefer to do is always use DHCP. Always go out to the name server, the host control protocol, and say, hey, give me a MAC address or an IP address. Have that thing have registered, oh, for these MAC addresses, it's a fixed IP address. So that's what I do at home. My printers have fixed IP address. My server has a fixed IP address. I always know which one it is. My laptop, my iPad, I don't care about those. And so every time that device gets turned on, it goes out and says, give me, it says, hey, your device 101, you're 102, you're 103, the ending IP address, which are 192.168.1.101, etc. Or I could physically go into my device and change the settings of my device and to have my device say, hey, I am this. I'm not going to ask no domain controller. I'm going to say my IP address is this, and that's where we can get conflicts. And I know we had this years ago where somebody set up a new printer and said, oh, I'll pick an IP address for it. Nobody's using this address. What happened to be a device in my office? And suddenly there was a whole lot of problems. So better to have a single point and there's a table, it's looked up, it's managed, these MACs fixed, these IP, everything else is automatic. Your infrastructure also can provide certain restrictions and limitations. We could say this MAC address can, like for my server that's in my office, it can only be plugged into that one port. Move it to another port, it may not be authorized. Your IP devices, your wireless devices, when you register them, they're like, oh yeah, they can go anywhere. on the network. We could have private subnetworks you can't access, an administration network you can't access unless it's specific device, specific machine. So all that can be done. If we know what's there, we can manage it. So what could go wrong? Yes, we can hide multiple devices behind a NAT router. We can spoof or change our MAC address, spoof or change the IP address, can lie when registering the device. Can insert a network device that will act as a man in the middle. So intercept all traffic and do things. It does take a long time to scan a full network for devices. They may not always be present. Like I said, they may be off. Easier to have network devices send alerts every time a new network is detected. So have your switch, your router, your access point say, hey, I found somebody. Somebody just connected. Make sure that an attack can't overwhelm the system where suddenly there's a whole bunch of messages constantly, another device connected, another device connected, another device connected. There was one attack I saw where somebody basically kept going out, rotating IP addresses and going to the DHCP server. Oh, here's an IP for you. Now I changed MAC address. Here's another IP. Here's another IP. So you get all the available IP addresses on that server to your one fake machine. And then when anybody else tries to connect, there's no IP address left and it's denial of service attack. And you've got them for 24 hours. So. Okay, now once we know what the devices are, we can scan for vulnerabilities. And there's two types of scanning we can do, unauthenticated and authenticated. Unauthenticated, we look at the device from the outside with no login permissions. We're like an attacker, an outside attacker. We use Nmap style tools. What ports are open, what services are available. Some devices, like in cyber physical systems, embedded systems, expect well-organized, well-structured, well-crafted packets, and they actually may crash when you're just doing scanning, when you're just pinging and trying to figure it out. So you have to be careful. There's authenticated scans where you can log into services on the device. Like I said, the network management software on my device. I log in, I collect more information. Or we can log in as an authorized user on the device to query the operating system. What version are you? When was the last time you were updated? What software are you running? That's harder. You need to keep credentials up to date to be able to log in. If you have common credentials to log into all machines, well, then once one of those is broken, it's broken on all the machines. So if you're using the same password physically on each separate machine, you have to change it. That's a problem. Where single sign-on, at least it's a central repository for your one password. You change it in one place and it changes it for all machines. So these are just things to think about. We have agent-based scans where we have tools, that special software running on the device, and it can just be queried without a full login. I just send to a port, maybe authenticated request, a crypto request, but it's always running, can send alerts to the central system when it sees something going wrong. It doesn't have to wait for queries. User doesn't disable the agent. Oh, I see the software running on my machine. It looks like it's taking up space. I don't know what it is. I'll turn it off. We have some tools that allow you to span specific applications, especially web applications. Like there's a suite called Burp Suite. It's a well-known web scanner. It scans websites for specific well-known vulnerabilities to see if they're there. And so people can do these. These are common. You can do fuzzers on your own tools, etc. There are challenges to vulnerability scanning, like using a tool. What if you're hosted in the cloud? You may not be able or allowed to scan everything. There are rules. You have virtual machines in the cloud that are turned on and off. So some cloud services are scalable. As increased load comes in, they fire up more VMs for your company to use, to then share the load on different servers in their cloud. Well, if they're not on, you can't scan them. There are containers, which are virtualized execution environments, not full virtual machines that run within a single host. And those are easier to start and stop quickly. And you have a container that does database application, another container that does your email service, another one that does other things, for example. And when you start a container, it may suddenly have access to several applications and services and even a web server that wasn't there when the container was shut down. And so again, if it's not running, I don't know. And so these are just things we have to worry about, especially the way they set up the cloud to do things very dynamically. It makes it much harder to do scanning. What type of vulnerabilities do we look for? Well, we can look at the OWASP. OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. They have the list of the top 10 common vulnerabilities you see in web applications. White Hat Security has a list of 40. There are, let's see if I can actually stop this. Oops. So if I clicked on that, okay. Let me do the, so if I go to the OWASP top 10, for example, broken access control is a problem. Cryptographic failure. So this was from 2017 to 2021, the changes in these top 10. The green ones over here that say new or new ones, so some disappeared. Cross-site, so injection attacks, like SQL injection, et cetera, that's went from number 1 down to number 3. Broken authentication went down to number 7. Sensitive data exposure went up. Broken access control went to the top. Cryptographic failures, something actually got renamed. So sensitive data exposure became cryptographic failures, et cetera. And so they talk about what these are on this website. So you have these links. This thing, the common weakness enumeration, is a project, federal government project, but sponsored by a MITRE Corporation is managing it. And these are common things that could happen. So in software development, we could have an application programmer interface function error, somebody using inherently dangerous functions, and they talk about what each of these possible problems would be, and they give examples of them. There's thousands of these. That's part of the problem with this. There's the CVEs, which are the common vulnerabilities. I'm not going to actually show that one. These are problems they've actually found in applications. There's a tool, though, down here for searching these. So I can say, hey, let me look for something in Microsoft. Okay, here's some vulnerabilities. They have a score from 0 to 10, the higher the worse. So here's a 9.3, that's a pretty bad one. Execute code, somebody can execute arbitrary code on the network, and I can click on it and it gives me details. Yes.
Just for fun, can you search up Apple?
Okay, I'll do that in a second. So this was malware protection. The vendor, the application, Microsoft, the product, the malware protection engine. And so here's the advisory. So let's see. Where'd the actual information go? So remote code execution vulnerability, but I'm not seeing the details. Usually they have written details on these. Okay, I'll go back to the, whoops. Wrong one, where was I there? Vendor search. Apple? Anything in particular?
It should all be red. There's so much.
So this was, a lot of different products. So I'd have to look more specifically. I mean, 5,373 possible vulnerabilities, and there are different levels. Memory corruption issue. Fixed in iOS 15.1 and iPad 15.1, et cetera. But it had some other problems. So there's constantly these problems. I should show this. Where'd it go? Oops. I swear I hit something different. I add that table. Let's see. Score reports of what we're commonly seeing. How many of each of them. Score distribution, where was it? Vulnerabilities by type, here we go. So number of vulnerabilities, denial of service type, code execution, So somebody can force it to execute whatever remote code you want, just a buffer overflow or other memory corruption or SQL injection attack, cross-site scripting attack, directory traversal, response splitting, bypassing something, gaining information, gaining privileges, cross-site request forgery, file inclusion, and then down. So in 2021, there's been 18,601 of these reports. Actually, that beat all last year's 2020. We're not done yet. And if I look at, let's see, buffer overflow, hey, 1,576 buffer overflows. We know how to fix buffer overflows. Why are they still happening? And these are severe ones. These we don't know. Amazon Workspaces agent is affected by an integer overflow. So an IO control handler in the Amazon Workspace agent below this allow attackers to execute arbitrary code in kernel mode or cause a denial of service. Be a specially crafted IO request packet, but they haven't analyzed how severe it is yet. This came out Tuesday. So we're trying to figure these out. And there's lots of these. So these are fun to look at. Where is my server? Okay, so there's lots of vulnerabilities out there when people are looking at their code, looking at their systems, knowing what these are, keeping alerts for specific products, even you can search. Penetration testing or ethical hacking is really going in hard now. Instead of doing just the standard tools, we want to test this for vulnerabilities that a hacker could exploit. Goal is find the holes in security the way an attacker might and fix them before they get in. And we have white hat hackers, black hat hackers, and gray hat hackers. So the white hats are those who use the tools for good, usually working with the company or for the company or as an external consultant. Black hat hackers are those who use the tools for corrupt purposes. Gray hat, well, they don't have malicious intent, but they don't necessarily follow the rules. When you're doing a pen test or an analysis as a white hat hacker, you should know what are the rules. What's the scope and what are the targets of the test? Usually defined by the client. All apps on a particular website, that's a website we're using for testing. All assets of my company, all development machines, but not the production machines. When you're doing this, they don't want you to affect the customers. There will be rules of engagement, like times a day that you're allowed to do things, network load limits, how vulnerabilities are reported. Now, I have a friend who does a lot of this work. He has his own rules of engagement with each company. His rules of engagement is, he says, look, security problems occur on a regular basis. If people are afraid they will get in trouble or fired for having a security problem, an accidental problem on their machines, they're not going to report things. So my rule of engagement is nobody is fired based on what I find. Nobody is punished based on what I find. You just use this information to make things better and to educate people. And because he basically finds out somebody who's hired because of what he found, he'll never work for the company again. Okay, so phases. First phase of penetration test is reconnaissance. Research conducted before you attempt an attack. Search the information about the target. Look for job listings that specify technology, like, oh, we're hiring somebody who can work on, iOS 15.1. Oh, they must be doing something, developing software for iOS 15.1. Okay. These are the type, they must have software or hardware that runs that. Look for postings requesting help. Hey, somebody at this company, I'm developing a product, I need help. Oh, I'll be very helpful. Look for email addresses, company employees, domains of the company, all those things. You find that out. There's different tools, the Harvester and Kali Linux, Hunter.io, website for emails at certain companies. Oh, let's try that. Let's see. Hunter.io. Hey, let's try uidaho.edu. Here's a bunch. Now, notice these don't show the full email address. But if you set up an account and log in, you'll get their full email address. There's 4,296 results here. For vandals.uidaho.edu. 77 of those are exposed. Okay, and I could try lots of different things. Hey, let me try whitehouse.gov. None found. Why? Either they can't find them or they specifically say we don't allow that. But there's lots of tools and you can try with different companies. You can find the subdomains, a list of subdomains in the company might be humanresources.uido.edu, that type of thing. So there's tools out that can do that. OWASP AMAS is used by a lot of people for bug bounty hunting. Tom Nom Nom, HTTP probes websites and domains, see if they're alive, see if they're doing things. All these we can use. We can see what website technology. Builtwith.com, let's try that. So builtwith.com. What was website built with? Let's try uido.edu. I hit caps lock, I guess. So analytics and tracking technology, we use Hotjar, Blueconic, Google Optimize, Google Analytics, Google. These are different things found on our websites, widgets, frameworks, mapping. So applications that something in our website use. Detailed technology profile, first detected, last detected, et cetera. So way back, Google Analytics starting October 2008, when they first started doing this. Redirection profiles, company profile, metadata profiles. So all this is out there, publicly available, easy to get. WAP Analyzer visits a website, checks for things. What web gives information about the website, et cetera. So these tools are out there that hackers use just for reconnaissance. I know what software you're using. I know there's vulnerability in Google Analytics and you're running it. Great, I can go for it. Then I try to do discovery. Web hacking, it's a web proxy, Burp Suite. It basically looks like a browser, but it goes and does a bunch of different things. You could try it yourself. There's Chioptrix has a vulnerable virtual machine and several different virtual machines. You can download them. There's also a Vuln Hub with virtual machines, and then you can try the tools on them. And this is kind of a good thing to just kind of practice. And we'll do some of that in later classes. Now you think you found a hole. Okay, one of the problems we find when people do vulnerability analysis, I found a problem. Can you exploit it? Is it really a problem? Can you see the contents of a file that's not allowed? Could you change a configuration? Can you run arbitrary code? Can you raise privileges, raise yourself to root privilege? If an ethical hacker can demonstrate an exploitation, then the company will listen. Otherwise, they'll say, yeah, but that's not a problem. Nobody will be able to do anything with that. You think it's a problem, but it's not. And so in the bug bounties, for example, when people go out and try and do these things, you have to show you can exploit it. Now, usually the exploitation is something simple. Remote code execution, you make it run a program like LS for listing directories or dir in Windows, whatever. You say, hey, I'm running this remote code. I'm able to execute something remotely and have it do things. If you can show that it does that, they know you can run any remote code. Or here's a file. Some of the bug bounties will set up special files and say, show us the contents of this file. Show us you can get to this specific file. There was one which was a secure messaging where they basically said, show us the contents of this message. And they even gave us the message ID. Reporting, very last but most important phase, report the results. Clearly document vulnerabilities you detected, exact steps to duplicate the results. Different from vulnerability assessment because here your reports show how the exploit can occur. There's some good examples out there for penetration testing reports. Like this one's an example. Security penetration testing of a HIE, so Health Information Exchange, for a customer. Your service provided, the company, version, whatever, date. Confidentiality, no event shall TBG security, that's the consultants, be liable to anyone for special, incidental, collateral, consequential damages arising out of the use of this information. In other words, I gave information to the company, you did fire that guy, he can't sue me. Document contains information which is confidential and proprietary to the company, the consulting company, and the company being scanned. Extreme care should be exercised before distributing, etc. Disclaimers, information presented is provided as is and without warranty, cover your bases. Vulnerability assessments are point in time analysis as such as possible something in the environment could have changed since the test reflective report were run. So just because we didn't find anything doesn't mean there's nothing there. And just because you fixed the one thing we found still doesn't mean there's not a problem, et cetera. New vulnerabilities may have been discovered since the tests were run. Reports should be considered a guide, not 100% representation of the risk. Then what they did, table of contents, purpose, asked TBG, so ABC Health asked TBG Security to perform a detailed security examination of their health information exchange for one of the customers. Test took place, these are the dates. Scope, it was limited to a single internet-facing web application portal. Here's the one we used, the authentication. They were given 4 different level views of the system with different rule access. So one is a non-HIE user and 3 other HIE users. Since some features of the application weren't available in the testing system, like a search function, which was used for user lookups, they weren't able to do it. So they had a search error. For future assessments recommended it be configured so we can actually search it. Then they did a summary of their findings. They did their testing category, website pilfering, file guessing attacks, modifying inputs and parameter tamping. And then they said, you know, did they find something high, medium, or low? So nice little report here, found a few things. And then what they do, so website filtering, let's look at that as the first one. They say, what is it? We search for many common issues, including unnecessary and revealing programmer comments, IP addresses, email address, raw SQL queries, database connection strings, hidden fields. Perform full text searches of crawl results looking for sensitive information within the website, the HTML code. They did not reveal anything that would be of use to an attacker. So, you know, often attackers gain information by just looking at the contents of the website. We spidered the portal to make certain we understood the layout, use regular expressions to search for it. So, hey, here's what it is, here's what we did, here's what we didn't find. File guessing, sometimes possible to find interesting content on a website simply by snooping around. We attempted various URL brute forcing techniques for common file names and ran Burp Suite, Dirtbuster, and AccuNext scans, didn't find anything. Good. Modifying input choices and parameter tampering. Web applications often pre-populate variables for users based on the user's identity, pre-populate values and hidden fields. The HA portal application allows pages to send encrypted requests via a series of different pages that take an encrypted request expiry and MAC parameter. So here's highlights of those. Content parameters are string representations of hexadecimal values generated on the server side, passed through the browser via request. Mechanism appears to be means of mitigating against injecting arbitrary parameters into requests, because they're encrypted strings. They're dynamic and they're unique each time page is generated. While the encryption mechanism was not uncovered, a motivated attacker may focus on discovering a means of decrypting the strings and expanding the potential attack surface. So they just talk about that. We can demonstrate, so message disclosure vulnerability was an issue they had. Application provides a user-to-user messaging mechanism which allows users of the application to send messages to other users. Messages are basic form of email, taking destination name, importance level, subject message. Messaging implementation contains a vulnerability that allows users of any privilege level to view any message sent through the messaging mechanism, regardless of whether the user was an intended recipient or not. They demonstrate this. They logged in with valid credentials, pen level 1, click on the messaging menu icon, click on sent messages, followed the following link. Note that neither username in the from or to fields are the current user. Screenshot below clearly demonstrates it. So the pen level 3, from pen level 3 to pen level 2. So they're able to find the message ID. And as long as they had the right message ID, they were able to get in because there was no authentication check. So they just go through the details of that in this type of report and talk about some other things. Highlight what they found, where they found the information. User can bypass. So like authentication here required name, address, date of birth, or last name and date of birth, but there was a way of bypassing the date of birth check. So you just need to know somebody's last name and you can get in. And so this is, like I said, a good example of a type of report and the type of thing somebody does. And this is Again, that's the things they tried and didn't try. Well, we got a 20-page report. Conclusion, issue 1 message disclosure vulnerability, risk rating high, that was page 8, etc. So this is the type of thing they expect to see. And I won't go on details, but it's there. You got a link to it from the web, the slide, so you can look at this if you want. It's a type of thing that people will do, and they'll run tools, and they'll have, mostly when I see people who do things like this, they have a standard set of things they try before they go and do anything else. They have a checklist. Oh, I'm going for websites. These are the things I'm going to check. These are the common. So you saw their list of 15 things. Normally, those are the only 15 that company would look at. And they'll tell people as part of the scope, these are the things we're going to look at for this application. A different type, they weren't doing physical testing. They weren't doing reconnaissance or social engineering. None of that was in the scope of what they were doing. There would be another test. My friend who does penetration testing with social engineering and physical, mostly he walks through the sites and looks for post-it notes, looks for other things, looks for stuff dumped. He's done even where sits in the cafeteria and chats with people, listens to what they're saying. You can even go in and, hey, I'm new here. Can you give me information about something? And people are so willing to help because you're inside. Now, sometimes people are smart and they're going to look at your ID badge, right? We know. So it's usually hanging on in companies or other things, hanging on lanyard, some type of ID badge, right? Are those at risk of being faked? Yes. So at the meeting I was at on Tuesday, a lot of people there were wearing their ID badges. Those are people who actually worked at National Defense University and they had their ID badges or worked with them. So at the beginning of the meeting, when they had the big sign up saying this is an unclassified briefing, the guy said, for the purposes of this meeting, we have a photographer who will be taking pictures. Secure your badges. And everybody took off their badges and pocketed them. Because there have been instances where people, oh, we took a picture in a meeting. We posted on the web. Hey, there's your badge. I zoom in. I now know what it looks like. I can copy a badge. And so now it's standard practice in the US government to hide your badges if photos are being taken. Because this is a concern. And those are the types of things somebody might think about. Can you draft into the building? Physical security can draft in behind somebody. Hey, I got a bunch of Starbucks and some donuts. Can you help me in? We got, I'm hosting the meeting this morning. Yes, it is so often you can get in. Even on this, the one I was at, there was a sign up, no drafting, use your own ID badge to get in. Well, I didn't have an ID badge. I couldn't get in, so they let me go in with them. And as soon as we went through the door, there's the guards, excuse me. And then he had to go and said, yeah, I'm escorting a visitor. He was about to walk up and tell them. They said, okay, then I had to show my ID before they let us further. So they had both accesses. But could I have done, that was good. There have been times I've been places there is no guard there or they're distracted. And so you draft in behind somebody and it's not a problem. Usually the guy who was escorting me, he knew I'd be coming in behind him. Usually you would say, no, you can't. Okay, so types of things we look at, we worry about, you report it. Oh, that was the last slide. So, questions? So, Cyber 210, for those who might be interested in taking it, it'll be next fall. We go over a lot of these things for a health company. At least I did this year, we'll probably do it next year. We actually put together the plans. You figure out what things have to be done. It's more, how do you plan this? How do you do the security? How would, step by step, what would you do for these assessments, stuff like that? What are your policies? So all the things we kind of glossed around here, we go into more detail. Cyber 220, secure coding. So we'll take that last software security section and blow it up into a year. Those would be the next two classes. 120 requires CS 121 as pre-req. So anyway, any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, no, this is the last lecture. Next week is just finals. Make sure you show up for your final on time, all your finals on time. If, for some people may not realize this, it should have been mentioned in your classes, certain finals like Calc 1 or final, whatever, they have a common exam. It's at night instead of during the class time. So just make sure you check the syllabus, whatever what your posted class schedules are. Two things you should know. Faculty without special permission are not allowed to change the exam time. If you have more than 2 exams in the single day, like 3 exams on Wednesday, you're allowed, well, actually it's a little late now, but you are normally allowed to ask for permission to get one of them to change. You should ask at least 2 weeks before finals week though. And just ask the instructors, can I take it a different day? Because we don't want you so burned out that just because you happen to have 3 exams scheduled in a day is why you had a problem in a class. Try to get some sleep before your finals. I had a friend in college, he always did all-nighters during finals week, and his grades in each final dropped. And he was a zombie by the end of the week. Yes,
So how many assignments should we expect to be posted that